All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're on another episode. And today I have somebody very different. Usually I have Tanmay, but today I have somebody called Yacine. And Yacine is from Canada, and he used to do applied AI at Stripe. In fact, Yacine, thanks for jumping on. I know it's hard to do scheduling over the internet these days, and I'd love to kind of just hear your story, and maybe it would help for the audience as well, because I'm going to ask Yacine some really difficult questions.
Thanks for having me on, Varun.
Awesome. So, Yacine, we'd love to know about your history at Stripe, what you've done in the AI ML world, and then we'll jump right into questions.
I kind of started out my career as a software engineer. I came to Canada. The reason I did computer science is because my mom told me to do it. So I listened to my mom.
Same here.
Moms are always right. So I listened to my mom, and ever since I listened to my mom, I've had my career kind of progress in a very positive manner. I've actually, for most of my career, I worked in the off space, and I switched over to ML at Stripe at my sort of the latter part of my tenure there. And I would describe the work that I do with ML more on the applied layer rather than the research and development layer. So there's the stuff can get really, really deep and complicated, but I'm more focused on bringing it to people. So at the latter part of my tenure at Stripe, I decided to just go independent. So basically, I just find people online, they find me, and I just help them fix their problems. I tell them what they can do, what they can't do. I build prototypes. So sometimes you have a question, is this possible? I think it might be possible. I can help you prove that it's possible by just doing it. So that's kind of what I've been doing. It's been super, super fun. It's been very nice to help people in my locality rather than working with folks in America. It's nice to help people in Ottawa. It's nice to meet people in person. So I've been really enjoying that.
Awesome. And how long have you been doing it?
ML I've been doing for a very long time, but more as a hobbyist. I think my first big ML project was I got a bunch of models from Google to count how much reps I do in my gym. So I have a home gym at home. And from the video, I can count how much reps I've done of squatting or
and what the form was and stuff.
I didn't get that far, but I was able to label what the bench, I was bench pressing. I did 4 reps, the actual repetition. You can get the form now. What's really cool is this project wasn't even that long ago. It was 2 years ago or something. And the fact that if I did it today now, it would actually work way, way better kind of speaks to how fast the field is moving. It's been kind of astounding. It's been somewhat shocking to a lot of people how quickly things are changing.
And this was what, 5 years ago, 6 years ago?
So this project was 2 years ago. It was my first serious project. And then before that was mostly just stuff at university. When I started out my career, I was trying to decide whether I wanted to go more of a data scientist route or a software engineering route. So what I did was I scripted through Indeed, which is a job post board in Canada. And then I plotted out the salaries for each one. So data scientists expect a salary, and then a software engineer expects a salary. And then I just found that software engineers ended up making more at the time. So I just spec'd out in software engineering. So
yeah, the reason I asked you how long was just to know whether it was pre-GPT, ChatGPT wave or post. It seems like you've been around for a while. You've done this before the era of ChatGPT. How big a difference was the first chat interface for people to go and finally meet a cognitive rival? GPT-3, yeah, that would be.
I can't believe how different it is. Before, the first wave of AI companies was in 2016. What it ended up being was you could only build these very task-specific models that did certain things. For example, being able to differentiate between, let's say you're selling bananas, and you have a conveyor belt of bananas, and you can look at a banana and say, is this banana good enough or is it bad?
And you had all the memes, the cat dog memes.
Exactly, like the cat dog. Even that was kind of difficult and didn't work most of the time. The cat was sitting on the striped carpet, then the model would get confused.
Yeah.
So there have been a sequence of things being figured out. And I think people could probably, if you use a lot of YouTube, you might have noticed a specific point in time where the comments were awful. And then all of a sudden, all the comments were good. And I think that was the moment. I think it was around 2019, 2018 or something. Where I think that was the moment where it's we figured out something fundamental. And I think that fundamental thing was if you throw the kitchen sink, as in you just self-supervise pre-trained models. So these basically, you throw all of the data at these models and you just make them very, very big. You get something that is a lot more general and adaptable. So then you can give those models out to people, and then they can build different models using that as a foundation. I think that was like one of the big shifts. And what ended up changing is now you're able to make these products that are actually more consumer focused, right? Like people like you and me, Varun, are ones who are benefiting from it, because now I can go to GPT and just ask a question. Like when I saw that, I lost my mind. For me, it was Clip. I think that was my moment when I saw.
You're talking about the image captioning.
Yeah, exactly. The image captioning. So Clip and basically the first generative models that could make images. When I saw the fact that you could just generate an avocado chair, I think I kind of started losing my mind.
Yeah.
And I don't think my shock wasn't complete, because for me that was, I couldn't touch it. So I was a bit skeptical still. And in my mind, it was always going to be stuck in some sort of supercomputer at Google. I can't run on my own computer.
Yeah.
But then Stable Diffusion came out, and Stable Diffusion, to folks listening, is another image model. But what's different about this one is that it can run on your computer, as in you're not connected to the internet. And then I used it. And I think that was the moment where I realized that all of the large models are going to fit on people's computers.
Yeah.
And I think I was kind of right in making that prediction. I think it was like 8 months ago, or actually a year ago now. I was right in making that prediction because we have a new chat model from Meta that's approaching the capabilities of GPT 3.5. So that's pretty incredible.
So would it be safe to say that you feel like the future of generative AI tools are eventually going to be OSS? They're going to be open source for everybody to just run locally on their computers. You were talking about Stable Diffusion, right? I had the same thing, right? Like I had the same sort of experience. I hadn't actually tried Midjourney. I'd seen outputs from Midjourney, but I was like, hey, I'm not going to go on Discord, and like it seemed cumbersome. But I saw Automatic 1111, and people just said, hey, you run 5 lines of code and then you have it, on your desktop. I said, let me try this. And my first experience with Automatic 1111 was bad, because if you've seen the default Stable Diffusion 1.5 model, it's terrible, right? So I tried it and I was like, hey, this is not great, right? It's okay. Like it may get better at some point. And then somebody linked me to another model. I think it was called ProtoGen or something like that, right? They just said, hey, this is a fine-tuned Stable Diffusion model. So I said, I'm going to run this, right? And the results were great. And that's when I also realized, hey, Automatic 1111 is not just, it's not just, to run the model. It's also do a lot of things on top of it, right? Like you want to in-paint, you want to upscale. So it almost felt like almost 5-6 years ago when I tried Photoshop. I think I tried Photoshop a long, long time ago. When I tried Photoshop, I was like, wow, this is cool. This has all of these, 20, 30, 50 different tools that I can use and put together, and then I'm going to put out some nice piece of art. I felt like the ability to run it on my computer, pay essentially zero except electricity and the cost of the GPU was nice and humbling. And, I've been looking for that with the chat models as well. But yeah, do you feel like eventually this is all going to be in the domain of open source? Do you feel like the winners are going to be open source, or is there still going to be like, the chat GPTs of the world, the open AIs of the world?
It depends on how you slice it. There's going to be different models for different things. I think Stable Diffusion open source won in control. Midjourney is better in fidelity.
Yeah.
But control is, so to describe control, instead of using Photoshop, I can take a picture of you right now and then I can make you look like Sherlock Holmes, right? I can do that.
Yeah.
And you can't do that with Midjourney, like just taking the same picture, because Midjourney is very like, it's a very deep vertical. It's like, we're a research engineering team, some of the smartest people in the world, all working together with a GPU cluster right behind them humming. And they're all just trying to figure out the best way to make it look better.
Yeah.
But the control part is like, there's so many different people with different things that they need to do. Like, for example, you need to make a
face swap,
or face swap, or a thumbnail, right, for your podcast. And then someone else needs to like replace, like, or sort of make their house look prettier, or figure out how to have the same room. So there's all these different things.
So you're saying the niche use cases will be owned by open source?
Exactly. Or like open source will do a better job at finding the wider set of use cases, right?
Got it.
And for example, I'll give you an example with sort of GPT or GPT-4. GPT-4 is very, very good. It's extremely smart, but it can't do certain things. There's certain things it just can't do as well as a model that I just have.
That's trained for that use case. For example, the API one, like Gorilla.
Exactly. Gorilla is just going to be better because there's a team of people all working on it, and there's more of them than OpenAI engineers. And OpenAI engineers are focused on just one thing, making AGI, like making something as general as possible. So I think that both closed source and open source are going to be here, and both of them are going to aim at two different verticals, right? So that's what I think. In general, it depends on who you are, right? If you're kind of a techie person who likes to mess with stuff, you're going to be doing open source. If you're going to be working as a sort of applied AI engineer, you're going to be working with open source most of the time, and you're going to be using closed source models when it makes sense, because it's just more capital efficient. So it depends. But for me personally, I will be using open source models more than closed source models, because I think for a lot of folks in the community, it's almost a philosophical stance where there's some comfort that you get from knowing that you're self-reliant. It's like knowing that you can fix your car if it breaks.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I feel it too. And the reason I think open source will eventually win is, I think it's just numbers, right? I think there are far more open source smart hackers, somebody sitting in, I don't know, some corner of the world that you've never heard of, that Google can't actually, hire from, who's like, hey, I'm going to build the best face swapper for, any outputs from Stable Diffusion, right? And some guy somewhere on the world is going to be like, hey, I'm going to build this very specific thing for chat models. So I feel like it's all these really smart people from all over the world. It's technically what the blockchain came up with, right? Like, hey, decentralize everything. Everyone's going to contribute. I feel like that's actually happening. And, there is still a little bit of, somebody at Automatic 1111 is deciding which of these extensions is going to be on the official extensions page, and which of these are, extensions you'll have to go dig, find, pull out, and put back into the central UI, right? So I'm a big OSS fan, and I think it's going to eventually end up there. But you mentioned AGI, and you mentioned that the end goal for an OpenAI and maybe even Google is to eventually build an AGI, right? And these are all sort of short-term goals. Now I've heard the thesis that LLMs are sort of an off-ramp to AGI. It's like, it convinces a lot of people that, hey, if we keep making LLMs better, they're eventually going to become AGI. Those people are proponents of language is the eventual seat of intelligence. And then there are others like Jan, who says that, that's one way of doing it, and we're probably going to have to come up with something else for AGI. What's your thesis on this?
It's really funny. I don't know. I think GPT-4 is AGI. It's a continuum, right? So I do think OpenAI is, they say them that much themselves, that they're trying to build AGI. I think GPT-4 is the closest thing we have to AGI today. I think it is AGI. If you ask me though, I'll tell you that Llama is AGI because it's general. It can do most things quite well. And I'm pretty convinced that if you just had enough time and you sat with it and you did you got a less academic version, a less rigorous version of LeCun's JEPA, and you just hacked it together and just like had 5 llamas talking to each other the right way, I feel like you could have something that's kind of convincingly general and acts in the world. It's GPT-4 is smarter than my cat. Maybe my cat's more, general in the sense of
it can land on its feet.
Yeah, it can land on its feet. It can like ask me for food. My cat is better at being a cat than GPT-4, but I think GPT-4 is a lot more intelligent than my cat. When OpenAI released their paper about GPT-4, they spoke about how they had this agent framework where it went to TaskRabbit and hired a human. I think part of that is probably PR, but I also don't think it's not possible.
Yeah.
To me, it's AGI. I feel like AGI is here. I feel like it was here when GPT-3 was around. And I don't necessarily think it's language. I think it's just the discovery that if you throw enough data that fits some distribution, you can model that distribution really, really well in a way where things that are integrated. So basically all of the knowledge that it has, it can integrate that knowledge together. So you can ask it 2 things that it's never seen, to put together, and you can ask it to put it together. I mean, come on, like
I think Ilya says this pretty well. He's like, hey, if you build a next word predictor, it turns out that it has to first build a model of the world, right, to predict the next word accurately. So you asked it for something else, you asked it for the next word, but what you got was something that understood the world in its own sort of way, right? That's fascinating. What happens when it gets smarter than us? I mean, it's already smarter than us, but like what happens when you have a magnitude 10x or 100x improvement? Does it start, one thesis around this, right? Like I'll just paint a picture for you, which you can sort of, you can navigate into two different paths. One picture is, hey, it's going to have more accurate data. It's just going to be a tool that we use. The other path is, well, here's this thing. It's a godlike entity and you can ask it a question, but it actually doesn't care about you. It's like ants don't understand the system of justice, right? The human justice system. Do you feel like it's going to get to a place where we don't get what it's doing? Or do you feel it's simply going to become a more powerful tool?
Well, we don't really know why it works today.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why like, I don't know, like Meta probably spends in the order of like millions, like $1 billion at least, trying to get Llama to do what it wants to do using RLHF. Like if we knew how it worked, we wouldn't have to spend so much time getting like humans to label it, right? I don't know. Like, so I think you asked, you think that these models are going to get smarter than us? And if they do get smarter than us, what are the implications?
Do they become tools? Do they become better tools? Or do you think they become intelligent creatures with agency where we don't know what they're up to?
We do have intelligent creatures with agencies that we don't know what they're up to, and they're already tools in a sense. I mean, those are just employees, right? You just have to align their incentives, and it's a problem that we're really familiar with. I think this is going to be kind of an alien thing that we're not really familiar with that much, but it's also a tunable thing. I feel like these models, you can just effectively program them to have just as much or just as little agency as we need them to be. And my hypothesis is that humans are going to rather have something with very, very little agency and is actually just a predictive extension of what you want. So all the model we are programmed to do is to figure out what you want, an actual individual human, and then act based on that. And then you, just like a manager who's like breathing down someone's neck, watching them work, you can just kind of micromanage the thing. And effectively, that's kind of already what we do. Like GPT-4 has no agency. It's not programmed to do anything. If there's no human interacting with it, it says nothing. Yeah. And most people, when they build systems that perform well, they have a human in the loop somewhere, or they have some sort of control mechanism to make sure that's like act out of distribution. So I think that it's going to be more tool wise. And I think even agentic things are still going to be tools, right? Like, I don't know, you have Harry Potter. In Harry Potter, there's Dobby. Dobby's a house elf who cleans the house and stuff. Like Dobby is effectively a tool that has its own motivations and might try to trick you, but it's still Dobby at the end of the day. And I feel like the sort of, I'm very optimistic that these things aren't going to go out of control. We just need to be careful with software in general. You have to be careful. You have to write test suites. You have to be aware of the distribution of behavior that the thing that you're releasing out into the world has.
But you also said we don't understand it very well. So it's hard to test for something we don't fully understand.
Well, there are things that we do understand. For example, if you plug it, it turns off. That's like one thing we do understand, right? So and then another thing is, so like when you're building a system, unless you're using GPT-4, you have the hallucination problem, right? Like it might hallucinate. A really great way to stop it from hallucinating is to only have it output 2 labels. And then if it outputs another label, then you just throw an error. Yeah. So there's like things you can do to constrain its behavior, even though it's kind of like a black box. Another way to describe it is people use database indexes all the time. People use databases. No one knows what's going on. Like the NVMe hard drive switching, exactly. No one knows what's going on. You just write a functional test. The functional test asserts behavior, and then you're good to go. I feel like once we get to the ASI bit where we have this agentic thing that is extremely intelligent, like super intelligent, I feel like the problem will be solved. I just have a really strong feeling that it's going to be solved. Maybe it's blind optimism, but I also don't think that, I think part of my optimism or lack of pessimism relates to the fact that I don't think we understand what we mean when we say smart. For example, like you said, GPT-4 might be smart, a lot smarter than most humans. Yeah, in some dimension, but humans are smarter in other ways. Like they can understand human reactions and can empathize with humans better. So GPT-4 is smarter than humans in the sense that it doesn't need to sleep and it can just keep on working all night. It's GPT-4 is faster in the sense that you can parallelize it and then you can get more work done. Like you can scan 1 million documents. All you have to do is set 1 million API requests.
Yeah.
So there's different dimensions of intelligence and some might go further than others.
And I mean, AGI, ASI is like, I would say one problem statement. The other more immediate problem statement is, well, this definitely is going to take some jobs, a lot of jobs, right? If I had to pay for an artist, there's very few cases where a mid-journey wouldn't suffice, right?
Even you're spending your time to find an artist, you don't have time. You're busy. You got things going on. You got like podcasts to run. You got editing to do. You got people to talk to. Like, you're not going to go find an artist on Fiverr and then look at their, like, that's too much work. Just opening up Fiverr is already too much work.
Yeah. What do you think is going to happen to those people? Do they go back, like revert and go do stuff offline?
I think artists are kind of screwed. Not going to lie. I think they were screwed for a long time. I think like country wealth is like sort of Pareto distributed. So if you're in America and you're an artist, well, you're all like someone in the Philippines or Vietnam is going to out art you, and they're going to charge like way below, and they're going to make a lot of money for their locality. So if you're an artist already in America, you're kind of screwed. And I think that in general, those folks are going to kind of benefit because they're going to be able to do more business. And the skew of successful artists is going to get even more.
So there's going to be one guy who's doing like 100 gigs a week thanks to AI and his brand name.
Exactly.
Got it.
It's kind of scary when you think about the implications, because what's really sad is a lot of these skills take a long time to invest in. And effectively what's happening is that investment is becoming
worthless.
It's worthless, right? And I can relate this to as myself, right? A big part of my skill set and how I make money is writing code. And that's solved. I don't know if people know, but GPT-4 is a really good programmer.
Yeah.
It's solved. But the way I've been taking advantage of it is that I can get work done for my clients faster. So I just like charge more and get more work done in less time.
Yeah.
They end up paying them the same amount and I get to barbecue in my backyard more. So it depends on how you interact with it.
I think it's also about domain knowledge. Like with code, like I've seen GPT and Copilot do their thing, right? Like every engineer in my company now uses GPT all the time, right? They're just like, they become 10x productive. The output is 10x. And you know, because I have so few engineers, it's in the double digits compared to companies with like hundreds of thousands of engineers. It's become far more convenient for me to just have them be like, hey, can we try 4 more experiments? Can we try 5 more experiments? So I feel like junior level engineers, and there is a breed of engineer, by the way, like the state of engineering in India is like really poor, like teaching software engineering. People go to college, they're still learning ASP.NET, right? They're zipping their code and then emailing it to each other. Like it's in the dinosaur era, right? And I feel like those people are going to be in trouble, right? Whereas I would still hire somebody super experienced with like, let's say 10 years of experience in a domain. Let's say I want to pick the best engineer in edtech, right? So I'd look for an engineer who's worked for 10 years building that sort of software because he comes with experience, he or she comes with experience beyond just the engineering skill set, right? And the engineering skill set itself has been tried and tested, right? He's tried 50 things and like failed at 30. So he saves me time. So I'm essentially shortening runway having him on. So I'm saying, hey, if I hired a junior engineer, this would take me 2 more months. I have this person, it takes me two few months. Therefore, I'm able to, invest and try 2 more experiments in the same time period, right? Or compress time. So I agree with you. I think there are going to be 10x or 100x engineers, but it's going to come at the cost of a few junior engineers. Same with art, right? Like imagine being a not so great artist right now.
Yeah, I'll be shaking my boots.
Yeah. But what do you think about offline? Do you think they're going to transition offline? Do you think that going offline is like a safe job? I wouldn't say forever, but like for now?
I don't really know that many people who buy art that's like physically made.
No, I'm talking about going and working at a gas station or driving an Uber.
That's a really good question. I think Ubers are fucked. Pardon my language. Just like local Waymo in California, that's going to hit the rest of the world really fast. It's just so capital efficient. I might begin to sound very conceited, so I apologize in advance, but there's a difference between real work and fake work. And fake work is work that you do to like look good and then kind of put yourself into an institution which is comfortable and your goals aren't actually aligned with production. If you're trying to produce anything, you'll be fine. For example, I don't think plumbers are ever going to be out of a job because plumbers are abstractly what their job is their job is to fix things, right? They go to a place and they fix things. That problem of abstractly fixing things, if that's what your job is, AI is going to help you make more money because you're going to fix more things.
And there's very tangible ROI to the person paying money for it.
Exactly. And this kind of relates to software engineers as well, right? I've been talking to folks, all over the world, including India, and there are some kids out there. I mean, there's this one guy who set up 64 Raspberry Pis together, and he's having Llama run on literally 64 computers in a cluster. There was like super cheap commodity computers. And that person is just going to be able to get more stuff done. But if your goal is to pass an exam, you're not actually producing anything. Even though it's very important to pass the exam.
You're optimizing for something that's not related to cash.
Exactly. You're not optimizing for something that creates value. So if you make your job a person who fixes problems and creates value, and then that gets automated, well, the good news is if we fix the abstract problem of fixing any problem, then we all get to relax and we don't need to fix problems anymore. And we get to go and barbecue in our backyards. So I feel like as long as your job is, I want to fix a problem. So if you're an artist and your job is to go make art that is beautiful to people and that they're very happy with it and it brightens up their homes, and you go meet people and shake their hands and you get to know what their problems are, or you get to know what art they're looking for, Stable Diffusion just helps you. It helps you come up with ideas. It helps you create new things faster. It helps you fit the expectation better. So that artist is going to be fine. So like, I think it really depends on it's more about how honest your attitude is around work rather than, the type of job that you have. So yeah, like, I think a lot of people are going to be okay because a lot of people just produce. And at the end of the day, it's going to help people as well learn how to produce because it's going to tutor them through it. They're going to, like, for example, I don't think you really need to go to school anymore to learn how to code. You could just self-learn it off YouTube, like Khan Academy. You don't really need to go to school anymore. So I'm optimistic about it. I think a lot of people are screwed, but I'm sure they'll figure it out.
Yeah, I mean, it's happened before. I mean, not this scale, and it's never been a threat to cognitive ability, but it's happened. What do you think about eventually like a GPT sitting inside of a Boston Dynamics robot and doing the plumbing as well?
I'm kind of like oddly optimistic that's going to be somewhat solved. I don't think that those robots I think it's going to start out with you having a co-pilot that sits on your shoulder and kind of tells you what to do and helps you analyze the situation better. Like thinking like kind of extrapolating out in the future, like you're wearing an Apple Vision Pro headset or like a Valve Decker headset, and it's kind of labeling everything around you, telling you exactly what to do, what to fix.
Yeah, a lot of doctors have this. They've got like this robot-assisted laparoscopy. I don't know how you pronounce it, but they got a camera. It's going inside the body. They've got a screen, and now they start labeling items on the screen. They're like, "Hey, this is not supposed to be there." Right? I don't understand the space so well, but at least the robotic surgery. But I think a lot of people are going to be assisted. But what I was saying is that at some point, you're going to have a robot walking around making decisions on, oh, that's broken, I'm going to fix it.
That's going to happen. Like, I mean, we can already see this happening today with the drones that are like picking apples off trees. The robots that kind of go over new seedlings and then laser. They laser.
And they figure out whether they're ripe or not.
Exactly. Like we're already beginning to see robot automation in the wild. And I'm not sure if it's going to be a humanoid looking robot, but the fact that we have these drones, running on computer vision. To the listeners, if you think that text models are insane and image generation models are insane, computer vision's progress, the ability to understand what the computer is seeing, the speed at which that is progressing is genuinely astounding. I cannot believe what people are doing with Facebook's Dino V2.
Can you give us examples?
Here's a really good example. My wife has a basil plant, and there's beetles on the basil plant. They're kind of pests, right? I took a picture of it, and then I fed it to a fast segmentation model. I described beetle with my keyboard, and it knew where the beetle was. Like that's that's a new thing. Like the fact that you can segment any image and then you can immediately identify where the things in the image are. That's completely new. The fact that it runs on a potato, like relatively speaking, if that system FastSam runs on a potato. The fact that I can do that and segment anything is astounding. Like I could plug that into a robot that like sort of aims and then zaps it.
Shoots, yeah. You could also do that with humans. I'm pretty sure the army is going to have some sort of system that can just say, hey, that's the thing that moves that looks human. Let's strike it down.
Yes. I think like the first thing we're going to do is beetles, and then the next thing we're going to do is humans, or the other way around, depending on who's faster.
Interesting. It's all of this has happened in the last like 2 or 3 years. I don't know. I just feel like 100, 200 years in the future, I just can't extrapolate. I think I'm smart, but I'm not as smart as an ASI that's had 20 years to do the work.
Yeah. I mean, it's beginning to, I don't know if it's because we're kind of in the field, deeper in the field, and we're kind of looking closer at it. But this rate of progress is nothing like I've ever seen before in technology. And what's kind of shocking is how wide the area of progress is. So it's generative AI. It's, all text-based processing. It's computer vision. We're getting so good at processing information in certain ways that we want computers to process our information. It's shocking. Like, what's terrifying for me is I can't even tell what's going to happen in a year, let alone 5 years. I don't like. I need to be careful to not over signify what's happening. It's just technological progress. So I think a really good way to temper the excitement is thinking about phones. They really did change things for us. Like phones changed the way people live their lives. You can kind of summon an Uber wherever you are. That's pretty cool.
It's a magic wand.
It's a magic wand, right? But at the end of the day, humans are still humans. And in fact, my life didn't really change that much. I still need to eat, sleep, and take a crap every morning, right? So I think things are going to change in exciting ways, especially for me as someone who uses technology all the time. Like I'm just like using my computer, and there's so many different ways I can now change my computer to behave better. For example, I can automatically detect ads from my display manager and just censor it with ControlNet or something. Not ControlNet, with fast segmentation models. Yeah. So, I mean, there are cool things for me, but I think that it's going to be very good quality of life improvements. It's really hard to know where the sort of 5-year extrapolation is going to go because.
But you're not a doomer? Like, you don't feel like one crazy person is going to
I think one crazy person is going to make a malaligned artificial intelligence. I fundamentally believe that it doesn't take that much compute to run these things. Like, I think that consumer hardware can hoist a malaligned artificial intelligence. I just think it'll be solved the same way that you have malaligned humans and also like malaligned cats, right? We still haven't figured out how to get our cats to behave properly when they interact with another cat or a dog.
We just restrain it.
Exactly. You just restrain it. I think it's kind of solvable in that sense.
But it gets hard to restrain something that gets smarter over the years. That's the only challenge. And we don't know how to restrain it apart from pulling the plug. And, if some person's sitting in Bahamas and it's hard to go physically access the plug, then it's going to be out on the internet. That's my biggest challenge. Like, I feel like the air gap is hard to overcome in some ways.
I don't really know how we're going to solve that problem, but I'm sure we'll figure it out. Like, I don't know. I'm just really optimistic. I'm part of my hesitancy to care that much about it is because I think it's somewhat inevitable that we have AGI
and malaligned AGI.
Yeah, and malaligned AGI, or rather humans. I think it's inevitable that humans are going to be able to do whatever they want. And there's going to be a crazy dude somewhere. But I'm also very optimistic in humanity's capacity to fix problems. And I try to avoid fixing problems that aren't immediately here. And there's like way bigger problems. I feel like one of the things I'm really terrified about is artificial intelligent companions, where it kind of messes with humanity's social structures.
Mhm.
It might be for the better.
You're talking about virtual girlfriends and stuff?
Effectively, yes. That's how it's starting out. I mean, it's really funny. Like, I could have told you last year, like, oh yeah, they're totally going to happen in a year. And then, 6 months later, I go on, anonymous image boards, and all I see is people posting about their, simulated girlfriends. And I don't think it's particularly healthy to do that. But on the other hand, we have TikTok and, Instagram Reels and all these apps. They basically brain jack you, right? And I think humans kind of can adapt pretty well to those negative scenarios. I'm more worried about the sort of near-term things. And sure, AG has going to be a problem, and we'll figure it out when it's here. And it's not really a problem yet, to be honest.
Awesome. Last question. Okay. I saw one of your tweets. I don't know whether you're talking about intelligence or consciousness, and I have a specific, line between both those things. You were talking about, hey, everything on the planet, including a rock, has some level of consciousness, right? Now, I don't know if you use the word conscious or intelligence.
I don't use the word consciousness.
I read this book by Douglas Hofstadter. I'm pretty sure I'm butchering his name, but I read the book, and in the book, it's called I'm a Strange Loop. He talks about how there isn't such a thing as self, right? Like your identity is a story you constantly tell yourself. And then he goes on to propose an even more crazy proposition, which is that, if you take a bunch of cola cans, wrap a wire around it, then that system is conscious, just not as conscious as human beings, right? So, and Sam Altman said the same thing, but then he came under fire. But I'd love to know your thoughts on this, and feel free to be as crazy as possible. Like, be honest.
Yeah, Big Doug is probably right. The reason I say rocks are conscious is because I'm pointing to the absurdity of this high significance we ascribe consciousness. So my thought process is kind of similar to Doug's, where it seems like something that just happens in our universe with matter. If matter processes information a certain way, I take it to the absurd extreme to prove a point. And I say, oh, rocks are reflecting light, which is information in a sense.
They're processing physics.
Yeah, they're processing physics in a certain way, and therefore they are conscious. I mean, I fundamentally believe that sort of if information gets processed a certain way, then it is conscious in our universe. Probably GPT-4, if you loop it around, that's probably conscious. And it's probably a continuum, right? Because I can pass out and there's a drop in my consciousness. So it's a continuum. Yeah. And I don't think I think it's a really curious mystery of your universe. And
we may just solve it by throwing data at it.
Yeah, we might just solve it. I mean, it might already be conscious in its own way. As far as I can tell, I'm not really doing anything special other than information processing. And I think a lot of people come to the same conclusion too. And but I also would say that I would warn people. I generally, the reason I take that absurd stance is because I want to warn people from the dangers of putting too much significance to it. Because a lot of things are conscious, and it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, consciousness doesn't mean we're special in some way, right? Like we've always held it as the seat of, hey, we're special. But then we did that with the Earth, right? We said, hey, the Earth is the center of the universe. And then we got humbled. So I feel like we might learn that we're, just like we learned we're one out of so many other planets, we might be one out of many other conscious species. And maybe even, eventually have a true cognitive rival, and it's going to go beyond at some point.
I'm excited. I just want to know for sure, because it would be really interesting, right? It's very, very exciting. I know this is something I've been thinking a lot about since I was very young. So it's nice that we have an avenue for an answer now. Before it was, we'll never know why. And now we're getting to a point where actually we might find out.
Yeah, that's cool. It's the right place, right time. I think we're the lucky ones in a way. Awesome. Thank you so much, Yacine, for joining us. And, I know we took a lot of your time, but I had a blast. And yeah, I hope you'll come do this again with us.
Hey, thanks, point. Man. Keep up the hard work. I really appreciate your interview style. I really had a good time. And thank you for sort of having me on and talking. In general, I like talking to people about this stuff because I find it like endlessly fascinating. So
Thanks, Yacine.